We call ourselves like an anti-organization, and that we just kind of create space for people to do stuff. And so there's so many activities, and there's so many impromptu stuff and things that people may be organizing on their blog that, you know, will never make it to the event post on Village or the newsletter, but that's what we want happening. We don't need to know everything that's going on. We don't need to be facilitating everything. It's just creating this space and letting it happen. And I think that's one of the reasons that Village has resonated so much, it has grown so quickly, is because we create this space.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in Vancouver, BC, with folks who are creating a village of Vancouver. These folks have been very active in a movement called Village Vancouver. I'm with Rand Chatterjee, Ann Pacey, Ross Moster, who is the convener and founder of Village Vancouver, which, so far as I know, is the most active metropolitan area in terms of transitioning to a more sustainable culture. Congratulations. You say something like 300 events last year you were part of or sponsored. That is phenomenal. How did you start this and when?
Well, Village started around 2007, and then we started formally meeting and becoming active in 2008. I had spent several years kind of stopping and smelling the roses, but then started getting this kind of activist itch again.
Oh.
My wife Laura and I had started a salon group, Salon de Elan Vital, and because we wanted to meet people, we had moved to Vancouver, or actually at different times, and didn't know a lot of people, partially on purpose. And so we started the salon, and we were fearless. We would go out and just start talking to everybody on the street and start inviting them. And that gradually got bigger and bigger and bigger, but it wasn't so much doing. It was lots of kind of being together, potlucks and spaghetti nights and film nights. So, as I mentioned, I started getting this activist itch and wanted to do something that was effective. And so I started thinking about it and realized that a common denominator that everybody likes to do is to have fun, to celebrate together. Because that's always been a big question for me, is how do you create effective social change rather than just spinning your wheels and patting yourself on the back and saying nice try but not really accomplishing things. So I started looking at different models. I had been active in LA Eco Village in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine, Cecile Andrews, down in Seattle, had started Finney Eco Village. And I knew about City Repair with Mark Lakeman. So this kind of idea of creating this space for people to come together, kind of the Eco Village model, but not one specific piece of property. The idea of an eco village spread out among a whole city. So those are kind of the basic roots of Village Vancouver. And also making it as easy as possible for everybody to engage in the kind of projects that they want to engage in, as opposed to us saying, well, this is what you should be doing. So I think that's one of the reasons that Village has resonated with so many people, is that we help them engage in stuff rather than us saying, oh, here's what needs to be done.
And in 2009, at the end of 2009, we became an actual transition initiative. So we presented the paperwork to the International Transition Organization, and we became one of the most organized. I think they congratulated us on the amount of activities that we'd already conducted and the level of organization and the membership that we had already been able to achieve. So 2009 we became official. So we're one of the biggest transition initiatives, I think, now in the world.
Yeah, we actually got an immediate response. I said, you've set the bar at a new level. We're maybe one of the first 10 initiatives in Canada, but if you actually look at our roots, unofficially we're the first initiative. We didn't actually start out to be an initiative. Originally my thought was I want to export the Village Vancouver model to the world, and then a little bit down the line we heard about transition and we said, oh, this is great. They're doing that. We can just focus on Vancouver.
Great.
Yeah, I have to say the first time Ross mentioned the transition movement, I was like, in Vancouver, impossible. And I sat in a chair here with a salon originally, and transition came up and I said, no way, but I got very involved because it seems like the only choice. We don't have any other options. We are in a world that, we can't expect the nations to do much. Our province and our cities don't do a lot. People have to, but individuals can't. So working together, all of us together, I think we can make a difference.
Can you give me a flavor for the kinds of, sort of your flagship events or activities that seem to have they've been juicy?
One of the things Ross again started this with spaghetti nights. Potlucks are wonderful. You bring people together around food. There's nothing more important in our life, our needs, than food. And so what we did was we said, okay, we can do potlucks around just this room, but how about we have a potluck for 200-300 people in a big room, bring people from the neighborhood together, and share all that we know how to make, share our stories. And we have an annual potluck every year, and we try to do it more often than that, even at that same scale, where we bring a lot of people together. We do that in my neighborhood of Main Street, which is in the middle of the city. And that's one of the villages that comprise Village Vancouver.
One of the villages, meaning sort of regions of the town? Is that how you think of it?
Because Vancouver is an urban area, so we have Village Vancouver, which kind of provides support services and engages in citywide activities and region-wide activities, because we're the hub for the metropolitan Vancouver. But a lot of this stuff, because we believe that a lot of the stuff needs to take place on a very local level. So what we call them neighborhood villages. We have about a dozen of them, and some are extremely active and some are not so active, and a lot of them are kind of in between. And they're engaging in all sorts of different activities. Main Street, for instance, Randy, you have monthly potlucks.
And so that kind of depends on, I'm guessing, who's got the fire in their belly for something in their neighborhood. I mean, I know you, Anne, have fire in your belly about emergency preparedness.
Right.
So I'm going to toss you the ball.
Well, I do it at two different levels, and it really kind of reflects the nature of how Village Vancouver is organized. I mean, we are a hub, so as Ross said, we provide support. So when we're actually through a show that you did a few years ago in Port Townsend, and it inspired us to try and put something in place, thinking along the lines that with these changes that we're facing, because being transition, we're worried about climate change and peak resources and financial instability. So with those changes that are going to disrupt our normal way of thinking, we need to build resilience in our communities. So, people tend to be fairly myopic. They think, Canada and Vancouver in particular tends to live in a bit of a bubble. And they aren't, nothing bad can happen here. This is God's place on earth. So it helps to have something that can focus people's idea on resiliency issues. So earthquakes here are obviously something that people identify with as being one of our major natural risks. So building around the idea that if we can build neighborhood preparedness so that neighbors, in the event of an earthquake, can come together and work together effectively to help each other, it actually, resilience translates to resilience in a number of other spheres as well. So while we're focusing on earthquake, because it's easy for people to get their minds around that, the fact that they're building knowledge of their neighbors' skills and assets and how to work together in an earthquake situation will translate very well into any other sort of circumstance. So we're providing support to a number of neighborhoods, but specifically in Dunbar, we've taken it one step further, and we're actually working with the Residents Association to develop a neighborhood program, as well as with the emergency social services, which is the first responders. And that's been a really interesting program.
So this is an example. We literally have probably collaborated on one level or another with over 100 groups and civic agencies over the last few years. So this is an example. We're also very active. I sit on the Food Policy Council, so we have projects going on with them. We'll talk about our FedEp project shortly. We sat on the local food assets, the Parks Board Local Food Assets Task Force, so we help create a food strategy for the Parks Board because they have lots of land and facilities. So that's part of the strategy is we collaborate all over the place. We have a film festival coming up called Just Film with Amnesty International and CODEV. That's going to be a new project for us. And all sorts of stuff take place in the neighborhood village. And in Kitts Village, which is where we are now, we're the largest and most active village. And we literally are probably doing at least a dozen activities a month. We have, this is our seed library over here, one of several. Randy actually bought this box. built this box. And we have collaborative gardens.
Tell me, what's the seed library? I mean, I see packets of seeds.
So a seed
How
library
does it
is
work?
kind of like a book library.
Yeah, try to imagine, you're going to a library, you borrow a book.
Right,
Well, you can
right.
borrow seeds, we just don't want them back. But what we would take back is we want you to plant them. And they're free.
Yes.
When you go out and buy a packet of seeds, you're tending to get 60, 80, maybe 150 seeds in that packet. You're not going to plant that many carrots. So,
okay.
and the reality is you're not going to plant that many carrots over the next 5 years. The seeds aren't good for that long.
Right.
Why not share? So the
Ah.
beauty of it is people will buy some seeds, and then the balance of what they don't need, they'll deposit. And then in time, as people learn how to seed save, which is, just, again, at the end of the season,
Yeah.
save the seeds, you can cut them out of your tomatoes, whatever you like to do, you can make a deposit back into the library.
Great.
And so we do that, and the goal is, in time, as is the history of seed saving in the world, is the seeds that produce the best produce in the area where you live, microclimates, they are going to be the right seeds to grow in the neighborhood. The ones that survive and continue and are saved are the ones that are the best for that neighborhood. And it may be that each neighborhood in the city of Vancouver, each village, has a different seed collection.
I can believe that.
They're
Because you
hotter
have
and
little
colder.
microclimates in the city.
So we have a number of seed libraries. We're having a seed library box building day in a couple weeks because we have more demand. We're actually hoping to get them in public libraries and community centers and neighborhood houses, and maybe 6 or 8 different projects. We also have a seed bank over in a Cedar Cottage neighborhood where they're focusing on saving and propagating heritage varieties.
Ooh, nice.
We do seed saving workshops, so a big part of our activities are actually workshops in general. The reskilling idea of the transition, so that we can go back to relearning some of them, we can pass on that information about how do you do some of these things that we've kind of forgotten over time.
Well,
so.
we have had centralized institutions, corporations, and so on who've taken that over, and people forgot that all of our ancestors were farmers. You've mentioned about food, and I want to go back to your feed up, but the thing that occurred to us is we've noticed that Vancouver the city is very encouraging of gardens of all kinds, community and local and little pea patches and all sorts of things. And it would seem to me that food would be a really critical issue in an urban area. So
I find as I get older, I know less and less. I think the only 2 things I know for sure, which I encourage people, is consume less and grow more food. And that's about all I can say I know for sure right now. So we're extremely active. Fed Up is one of our projects that's in collaboration with the Food Policy Council and the Museum of Vancouver. We have
What does Fed Up mean?
So the Fed Up is one of the key components of transition is an energy descent action plan. So it tells
Energy descent action plan. All
So
right.
it's looking out 2040, 2050, what is our vision for a world that we want to live in? And in our specific case, we're talking about a food production system that serves the Vancouver population, that's resilient, that takes into consideration low carbon footprint, that doesn't require significant amounts of food being imported. So one of the key components is developing a vision, and then the question is, how do you get there from here? So we've been doing a number of activities through the Museum of Vancouver, the fantastic facility, really inspiring, and bringing people together to learn and think and push their boundaries as to what they hope and imagine the food system would be like or could be like. That really satisfies our needs and provides that sense of stability and food security. We've also worked with the universities. We've got a couple projects going on right now to investigate some of the more specific aspects. In particular, I'm leading a group of 4 students at UBC in looking at climate change and the impact on the local food growing capacity here in Vancouver, both in terms of impacts, but as well how food might help mitigate climate change. And the other interesting thing that I think Fed Up actually shows as an example is that it provides an opportunity we've taken as a vehicle to collaborate with other organizations. So rather than each one of us going out and trying to invent the wheel, what we're doing is we're meeting in a series of brown bag lunches that are sponsored or hosted by the museum, and we get together and we talk about the projects that we're working on, the visions that we've got, the directions that we're taking, and it's providing an opportunity for us to really strengthen our collaboration.
That's fabulous.
Which is a classic dimension of transition. Work together rather than try and be, top dog.
I think that's what's interesting about transition. There's maybe not necessarily anything new. I mean, there may be a few new elements, but it's kind of de-siloing all this great work that's going on everywhere and trying to put it together and articulating that it's all part of this larger picture.
And so one of the things so FEDUP is the Food Energy Descent Action Plan is how we get the actual acronym. And food is in our economy a major portion, maybe 20, 30, even 40% of our carbon footprint.
Aha,
It's gigantic. And we also, in the Lower Mainland, we have a lot of agricultural land. It's protected by provincial legislation. We have an agricultural land reserve that stops cities from, sort of suburbanizing through the whole community. Portland, Oregon has a similar, it's a wonderful thing. Yet we don't use the land as much as we could. We import about 80 to 90% of the food that we eat.
Really?
That's a serious problem in terms of both the carbon that goes into the food, transportation here, the way it's grown, other issues, and also the fact is that it may not continue. We may not always be able to get that food.
Yeah.
What can we grow ourselves? What can we learn about food by growing it in our own backyard that we can use to buy our food, the food we have to buy, more carefully, more sustainably? And I think the value of having local farm in the city, very, very localized community gardens, collaborative gardens, is that you learn about how your food is created.
Yes.
And that teaches you, because you're not going to be able to feed the whole city from just community gardens,
Yes.
but our children can learn how we can maybe start our own or join community-supported agricultural systems and start beginning to be more sensitive about where our food comes from and what its ecological footprint is.
We run literally as many as 100 workshops a year, the majority of which are food-based, not entirely. Permaculture, of course, transition is has its roots in permaculture, so a lot of our workshops are permaculture-based. The majority of our board have permaculture design certificates. We've created some small permaculture food forests.
We also do the awareness raising, which is another classic element of transition. So we do speaker series. We just had Nicole Foss in and Mark Lakeman from Portland, Oregon, and Richard Heinberg has been in. We sponsored that. So speakers is really important. We do a demonstration village on a regular basis.
One of our
What's a demonstration village?
So the long name is very long. Demonstration Neighborhood Sustainable Transition Village. Our flagship demo village, which is the short version, is at Car Free Day. We have this huge Car Free Day in Vancouver, which draws 250 to 300,000 people over several locations.
Wow.
Big street fairs in Kitsilano, we do block parties, but the other ones are big street fairs. So we basically say, imagine your ideal neighborhood. And then we invite everybody who's interested to participate. We took over a whole intersection this year.
Yeah, the buildings in our neighborhood are tents, they're temporary, but...
And we've become one of the highlights of Car Free Day. So I think we're up to 18 tents. We'll have chickens and beekeeping and the seed libraries and a plastic-free kitchen.
Emergency preparedness.
A library.
We invited, for instance, Urban Farming Society and other environmental, ecological, and social justice groups. And it just keeps
solar
getting
panel out on the street,
solar
so
panels,
we're collecting energy.
bike maintenance. So basically, it's like imagine everything in your ideal neighborhood and what would it look like. And so we keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. It's kind of fun.
That's exciting. It sounds to me like it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of having some fun. What can make this stick, not and make change is going to continue.
So.
There's another piece that we definitely don't want to miss out on, which is the whole economic aspect of it. I mean, recognizing that there's a relationship between climate change and peaking resources and the economic circumstances that we're in. We're really active in learning and trying to develop and push the boundaries on how an economy fits into this whole picture. So
one of our initial directors actually started a local currency in the city.
Yeah.
So we have our own local currency. It's called Seed Stock, and that was again, it was his own initiative, but he was a part of Village Vancouver, attempted and helped to broaden it and to get its use more wide. We also started, we have a new institution called the Pacific Institute for Ecological Economics that teaches economics in the proper way. We take a textbook written by Herman Daly,
Okay.
who's the founder of the ecological economics movement, and we teach out of that textbook, and we have classes twice a month now, 2 different levels of classes, in fact, to give people the intellectual understanding of why peak oil is happening, what it means, what the whole economic system is creating, and why it creates dynamics that may not really be sustainable.
So we're looking, I'm guessing Herman Daly I've known from the notion of the steady state economy
Yes.
rather than the growth economy that is using resources very quickly and destroying a lot along the way.
So we have to reprogram, we have to create a new analytical framework at an intellectual level, as well as at the deep-seated emotional level on the street. But we want to be able to reach people where they are, and for some people, having the intellectual understanding of where transition comes from and what its purpose is every bit as important as the fun on the street and really
Yes.
enjoying.
So
Yes.
it's an example. So we've run, and we do a lot of economic stuff there, a transition school at Langara College Summer School on Sustainable Communities. And actually, we've done this for 6 years. And we usually offer about 15 to 18 different offerings, everywhere from the reskilling, so kind of the very, very micro, to the community-based stuff, because a lot of what we do, we're saying that the individual can't do it on their own, but we can. It's kind of DIY community is one way to put it.
Do-it-yourself community.
Yeah, so it's and to the big stuff, the big picture stuff. So we have other members like Catherine who are running the big picture things. So it's a mix of all of this. Transition is, we say, the head, heart, and hands. So we also say, we've probably defined village in 100 different ways, but probably the way we've settled the most on it's like village is like real life, only more resilient, because it encompasses everything. People ask us what we do. We say, like, I think it was that movie with Marlon Brando. It's like he said, I forget it. It's like, what kind of trouble do you like to get into? And Marlon Brando says, what do you got? So everything is fair game for us.
But but you've got that umbrella. Your real life only more resilient. Okay, then you get to, well, what does more resilient mean? I want to go back to the economies for a second. You've also done some events, is that right, around the economy, around a sustenance fair?
Well, there's a few things specifically on the economy. We partnered on the new economy conference at UBC as part of a North American series of events at different campuses. Ours was 2 days with about 35 of the leading minds presenting. A lot of us
David
participated.
Corton was our
David
David Corton, sure.
Yeah. Bill Reeves, co-founder of Ecological Footprint.
Right.
And we had hundreds of people. We were associated with Living the New Economy, which just concluded, which again one of our ex-board members organized, and we introduced Mark Lakeman and City Repair. Sustenance Festival we're very involved with. It's run by the Parks Board. It's a city event. So we provided over a dozen activities. Neighbor Saver, which was our zero waste potluck for hundreds of people, was the opening night event. And our From Here to There at the museum as part of Fed Up was our closing night event. So we participate in all sorts of festivals, harvest festivals, and it affords us ways to, for instance, with sustenance, the theme this time was a little broader than food. It was cultivating a lighter footprint. So we partnered with people from the Lighter Footprint. Vancouver has this Greenest City initiative, so the Lighter Footprint Feed to the Fire Committee. And we looked at the 5 ways that we could lower our ecological footprint. So another example of how we collaborate with wherever possible.
The 100-Mile Diet was a book written by a local couple here in the Lower Mainland, and we have a lot of different collaborations. One of the recent ones we had Charles Marone come from Strong Towns Network. Strong Towns Network is a phenomenal group that looks at city finance and city sustainability from more of an economic standpoint. But that's important. I mean, economics
Sure.
are as important as with the other two principles of sustainability, the ecological and the social. And so we really try to hit all of them and equally, because everyone's going to have their entree. It may be
Yes.
they're worried about the whole Ponzi scheme of the whole finance and debt and things like that as being the critical thing that they care about, and we work on that. That's the origin of the local economy, the local currency that has doesn't, it's not based on debt. It's the
That's
first
right.
local currency that's
That's
not
right.
based on debt, and most aren't. Yeah, most
Yeah.
aren't.
I
So.
think, and we probably shouldn't, living in Vancouver, living in Canada, we would be really remiss in not to mention the relationship with First Nations. And although there's a lot more to be done, we've also had some really active participation in the FEDAP process through the Museum of Vancouver, particularly our last event, not this one immediate, but the one before, where we were telling stories, and we had a First Nation woman who came in, an elder who came in and spoke about the relationship of the land and the food and the traditional ways of gathering food, and how that has influenced her life, and how she's working within her own community to bring back that knowledge and that reverence and in how they gather and deal with the land. So I think it's an area where we really do have.
Yeah, we
it's
wanna-
very important in the
It's
psyche.
something that we
I'm
want
glad.
to look into more. We're actually quite, I should mention, because this comes up a lot, we're quite culturally diverse. A lot of participation. Vancouver, of course, is very multicultural, a lot of different ethnicities. And we've had some pretty good success. In general, I mean, our boards have always typically been, age-wise anywhere. I mean, we'll have 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So a lot of diversity there, and that kind of reflects Vancouver. We're also working, starting to do more stuff around social justice, because I think that's, this economic inequality and equity is something. We see that the economic system tends to be more and more a house of cards, so we're getting more into that.
What I hear is several things. Is that looking at the whole picture of all the interrelated things in terms of how does it all become more resilient and more just and more sustainable, all of those aspects. I mean, your mention of the First Nations here, they were doing it sustainably for far longer than we, and we have a lot to learn from them, and I'm really glad to hear that they're part of the conversation about this.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much we can learn that, again, it's like we're so excited about this stuff, but what we forget, I mean, there have been communities around, for instance, in food, the Italian communities, the Chinese communities have been doing, food sustainably in their neighborhoods for generations. And sometimes we would have to remember, we come along and go, oh, look, we've discovered this. Well, we're just kind of, it's there. It's not new. It's just we're helping them maybe further along, but it's not. We haven't discovered it.
Yeah.
Transition's really about remembering what we've forgotten, and we're very thankful to have elders and from every social group, from every economic group, from the First Nations in particular, on whose land we sit right now. And I think it's very important that we recognize that these aren't new ideas. We're just bringing back the best ideas from history.
And good to recognize that and acknowledge, that they're teachers.
And we do it in a way like nobody knows anymore. We call ourselves like an anti-organization, and that we just kind of create space for people to do stuff. Nobody knows anymore everything. I may know most of what's going on, but there's so many things going on. Like you mentioned Charles Moran, I had no idea. So there's so many activities, and there's so many impromptu stuff and things that people may be organizing on their blog that will never make it to the event post on Village or the newsletter, but that's what we want happening. We don't need to know everything that's going on. We don't need to be facilitating everything. It's just creating this space and letting it happen. And I think that's one of the reasons that Village has resonated so much, it has grown so quickly, is because we create this space for people.
Open source movement.
An open source, I was going to say, it sounds like this is not a top-down kind of hierarchical organization, and you all have to control the, whatevers. So there's got to be some aspects to how you are going about this that's making it spread sort of virally on its own, like good weeds, if you will.
It's right, rhizome or mycelium.
Rhizome,
yeah,
yes.
it's creating that space. We do create support. We do engage in, we are a society, we do engage in strategic thinking. We're looking at, one of the things we're considering is enrolling, like, how could we possibly combine some of these elements a little more? So, for instance, and as emergency preparedness, how can we do that in every neighborhood? We've started doing bike maintenance workshops. How can we do that in every neighborhood? How can we have seed libraries? But also desiloing those within village. So how do we create this program? I remember in Totnes, when they first started, they had a series of maybe 12 gatherings or workshops on different topics. So we're starting to look at how could we bring that all together. We're gaining more and more access to community centers and neighborhood houses. Could we actually unroll, it's quite ambitious, could we unroll these programs where we touch on all of these topics around resilience in every single neighborhood? So that's one of the things. It's maybe as a very ambitious, large-scale thing, but that's one of the things we're starting to think about. So it's that strategic thinking combined with, hey, you're a member of Village or you like Village, how can we help you do stuff?
You could argue it's matrix management. We want everything to be done locally, but we want the best of the collective to be reflected locally. So in emergency preparedness, I rely on Anne for her ideas in every neighborhood. But every neighborhood's got to embrace it and take it on, because it can't come from on top.
No.
For sure. You burn out. And part of what,
it's not just that, it doesn't have that content. That's not the purpose
and they're
of
not
it.
your neighbors.
Exactly.
If it's over in another part of
Yeah.
Vancouver, you need that village to know one another.
So we can provide models, emergency preparedness, the seed. Everything is a way to bring people together. It can be anything. I happen to love potlucks, so I generate a lot of potlucks. But if somebody wants to start a lawn bowling team and that brings people together in their neighborhood, anything except for maybe SUV races or something, again, it's getting back to what do you want to do? How can we help you do it?
To say how decentralized it is, any member of Village Vancouver, we have 2,000-3,000 members, can post an event on our website for all to see.
Wow.
Everybody's free to do that. Now we might edit if it's an SUV race. That hasn't happened yet.
That's not real
it hasn't happened
sustainable.
yet. So, it's just beautiful things happening.
And other groups, I would say at least half the events on Village are posted by other groups. So that's part of it too. And that's, in fact, I forgot to mention, when we started, and we do this to some extent now, we would have these tables at events, and we might have information from 30 different groups. I used to get flack from people. It's like, where's the Village information? Because we had very little in the beginning. So we ended up promoting to everybody else, and then gradually, of course, we've got these neat kind of little bookmarks, which I recommend. They're much more effective than brochures. It just, and they're a lot cheaper too.
So you do probably have a booth of some sort that's got.
And now of course we've learned to toot our own horn a little more, but still that's part of it. It's like collaboration, and and people respect that, because people come to Village to help them do stuff because they see, because when we first started, it was like, who are you guys? We're doing this. Why does there need to be a new group? But now as they recognize is that we try to, lift everybody up, and people really love that. So.
It sounds to me that through your website and your other means, what you're doing is amplifying the voices of some of those groups. You're empowering people to start their own things. It's a very decentralized model. As long, that's sort of broadly within the same vision of how do you create a resilient city, and neighborhoods.
And very people power oriented. Our budget is like a few $1,000s a year. We're doing, again, 300 activities on a few thousand. We're not adverse to money. We'll take, happy to take money, but we've seen so many groups, when the grant doesn't come through, go down the tubes. So 95% of our resources are people-based. So that if a grant doesn't come through, so what?
You've got your own, in a sense, your own alternate economy right there amongst the people.
It's resilient. We want to be resilient. We want to be here no matter what. And that really involves people. And those people working together.
Really?
Whatever inspires them, it'll all fit into transition somewhere.
This is really inspiring. You're creating, the seeds of the next, or the culture, the post-industrial culture. Right?
We hope so.
So, in our last wrap-up minutes, is there anything hot that we just didn't cover that's just, we could probably do it for hours.
There's a lot of stuff. We've just begun to touch on stuff. A couple of things. So we mentioned food. So each neighborhood village, also because a lot of the activities around food functions as a neighborhood food network. So we consider Village to be a network of neighborhood food networks. We also participate, there are also other networks out there. A lot of them are maybe more social justice oriented than ecological. And so we've joined their network, and it's just this wonderful collaboration. We share information and resources. So that's something that I'm really excited about because Vancouver is so food crazy. And the other thing within that are drop-in spaghetti nights.
Drop-in spaghetti nights.
And I rarely eat spaghetti. But
Yeah, which has now become I don't want to say a brand name, but a way to refer to it, because hardly anybody ever serves spaghetti anymore. We've done probably 30 or 40 of these. They even precede Village. I got the idea, again, I mentioned my friend Cecile Andrews, who wrote Slow is Beautiful. She mentioned in one of her books down in Seattle, a neighbor would put on a big pot of spaghetti and people would drop by after work, and she would feed them. So we started doing these in Village and even before Village, and the idea was just to cultivate fun and introduce neighbors to one another. But we realized that a couple days later, it was actually my wife who mentioned, well, we ended up feeding 15 neighbors on one stove. So because we had served garlic bread, we call these garlic bread solutions, which are fun ways of creating community, of getting people to lower their carbon footprint, especially people who if you ask them to do that, they'd say, go away, I'm not interested in being sustainable, I'm not interested in creating community. So we use these, we go out and get neighborhood small grants, which are wonderful tools. And this year what we're doing is we're also seeing how we can create our own little mini food systems, particularly in Kitsilano. So we offer people seeds to grow food for the spaghetti dinners. A lot of the food has come from the Kits Village Collaborative Garden across the street. We run a plastic recycling depot, so if there is any packaging, people can recycle their stuff at the village recycling depot. We run food scrap drop spots programs. We've helped divert over 85,000 pounds of food scraps.
To go to compost?
To go to compost,
okay,
yeah,
right.
we're a partner of that. So with the spaghetti nights, it's not only, and the whole focus is around introducing people who live within 2 or 3 blocks of one another who may not know one another, because we think that creating that connection and community is a big part of where it all starts. When people know each other, then a lot of these projects in Village have come out of that, the recycling depot, dinner groups, seed libraries, and those things would not have happened if neighbors didn't know one another.
The important thing is to meet people where they are. And the beautiful thing about meeting people where they are, intellectually or physically, is that you might look in their backyard, and they have a big backyard with a lot of sun on it. They don't have the skills to farm it, but boy, we have people who have lots of skills and no land.
Right.
It's a beautiful opportunity for sharing, and you can learn from people hugely when you meet them where they are, because they probably have as much to teach us as we have to teach them.
And that's one of the reasons we can do it with so little money, because there's these amazing resources, knowledge, assets in our neighborhoods. And we just tend not to know our neighbors, but when we know our neighbors, we find that a lot of the solutions are sitting right there in our neighborhoods, and we don't have to go to, experts or government. I mean, we'll take change wherever we can get it, I mean, we tend to be very bottom up, but it can be top down, bottom up, sideways, wherever, because there's so much that needs to be done. Wherever it comes from, great. But for us, a lot of it is the bottom up, grassroots neighborhood approach.
Thank you. This is really exciting. I'm really appreciating, you've got a model here that I think a lot of other communities could learn a lot from, in your attitude and your approach. Thanks for keeping it going.
Well, thank
Keep
you.
it making. And we'll just come back in a few years and see what else has also blossomed.
And we're so great, we're so lucky to have you to help
yeah.
document this and share what we've learned, but what other groups have learned, and that's where we get a lot of our knowledge from as well.
Yeah. Well, it's collaboration at a higher level, at a broader level, across the planet. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're watching Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm with folks who are making their city, I think, blossom. Village Vancouver, Ross Moster, Ann Paisley, Ran Chatterjee. Join us next time.